Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm here with Josh Denny again to do another recording of our discussions about the Gurdjieff work. And I was going to start with a quote from Gurdjieff's third book, Life is Real, and it's about the soul. If all men had a soul, long ago there would have been no room left on earth for poisonous plants or wild beasts, and even evil would have ceased to exist. Soul is for the lazy fantasy. For the lazy, soul is a mirage, luxury for the indulger in suffering. It is the determiner, the seal of personality, the way and the link to the maker and creator. Soul is the residue of education, the prime source of patience. It is also testimony of the merit of the essence of eternal being, leader of the will. Its presence is I am. It is a part of the all being. It will so and always will be. And that's page 160 from Life is Real. So Joshua, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great, poem or quote. And again, it goes back to like what we were talking about in our last chat about, the ideas about whether, everybody is born with a soul or not, and like that poem suggests that, like it says, doesn't it, that if everybody had a soul, then obviously, long ago things would have been very different. So, it does seem to err on that side that it's something to be developed in life. But like it says, the soul, like it links it with the creator, like the means of the link with the creator. And so it's, obviously again, there's the idea then about having some kind of like immortality to it. So I tend to link immortality with like a different kind of time. I don't see immortality as in that normal kind of idea of just like persisting, continuing forever. Like that would just be like the extension of linear time just going on forever. I think when they try to talk about immortality and those kind of things, I think it involves, like a different idea of what immortality would mean, not just, like what we might imagine it is just carrying on experiencing in like maybe our normal form, but just, forever. So I think it implies some kind of different kind of time, temporality. And I suppose that like in connection with the ideas of different worlds, like, in Gurdjieff's teaching, and especially like in how he presents that in Search of the Miraculous, there's like, isn't there? There's like the idea of the reality is having different worlds in it, different cosmoses, higher and lower, and they're all interrelated. But like the idea is that in each world then or cosmos, there's a particular kind of law or set of laws that are, that are active. So it's like each world then kind of has its own sort of space and time. So if we're like, if we're talking about whatever sort of world or level that we'd put the soul, on, which kind of like in the normal view of the cosmos is would probably be like, at least sort of at the level of the level that's associated with the suns, our sun or all suns. So obviously, then if that's the kind of level that it's, the soul is at, it's got a very different kind of, materiality. Space and time would obviously have a different sort of meaning for the soul than we're used to with our normal bodies.
With the soul also, to get to it, we have to use our solar energy or the solar energy that's out there to help create it.
Well, it's like, again, in Beelzebub's Tales, it's kind of, like, I pronounce it as a Kaidanok. Some people say a Kidanok, but it's like this, it's almost talked about as like a substance that's kind of like emanated from the source, like in Beelzebub, that's like, the most holy sun absolute. So again, the link to like a sun, So like if the Kaidanok, this like substance then or energy is like emanating from it, then we might link that with this like, solar energy in the sense that it's coming from the holy sun absolute, the prime sun. And the idea is that sort of energy or matter kind of, proceeds down from the source and expresses at the different levels in different ways. And in man, like in Desmond Tales, that Akaidanok is almost talked about as like the main kind of food in a way. Like it's expressed as what enters, man as a three-brained being, and kind of when it enters him, it sort of divides, separates into the three, like his three brains then, and that having a link with the three forces. And it's like, so it enters him and separates out into its like three aspects. Akaidanok says it's got like these three forces in it, affirming, denying, and reconciling. So it kind of like, enters the human, separates out those three forces in kind of correspondence with his three brains, but then it sort of reblends again, and like leaves, so you can think of this constant flow and flux, of this like Akaidanok, or this substance then that passes through man. And the idea being that we can kind of alter that process or retain something of it, through our own intention. Like it's almost looked at as kind of like a process of combustion. Like this energy enters us, it works the different pistons, like in these different explosions, but then it leaves, and in general, it only provides enough like nourishment to just keep us alive, and ticking over. But the idea being that we can, through our like intention and will, absorb what, like the higher elements then, the higher matters that are that are given to us through this process. And
so are we transforming that?
That process being being the idea, the process of how we can, create or coat the higher being bodies. Like taking in more of this like natural or solar fuel and solar energy that's being emanated to us.
Because one of my favourite quotes of Gurdjieff's is, "It's better to be eaten baked by the sun than raw by the moon."
Yeah.
Which is
a
hard process, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, again, that idea that everything is linked in reciprocal maintenance. Everything is connected, so everything kind of feeds something else and is fed by something else. So there's kind of that idea in the work then that like that the higher potential is to be eaten by something of a higher like nature, and by being eaten by it, you kind of incorporated into it, like just as we eat physical food, and that sort of that matter enters us and becomes part of us. Some of it leaves, but we something like something of it truly kind of becomes one with us, blends with us. So you could say that really like all the different foods that we eat and the different essences, through our process of eating them, they become part of us. And so those lower essences, then lower levels of existence, kind of, they get evolved, upgraded through our process of eating them. It's like you could say maybe something of the animal essences or the plants, that we eat, they kind of get to partake of the human experience by our eating of them, and vice versa. Like through our eating of animals and plants, we do kind of get something from their sort of level of being, something of their level of being enters us. But maybe, if we become more conscious and stuff, we can like more consciously assimilate the kind of information and stuff that's in there. Like maybe if we kind of become more conscious and connected to these inner processes, like the physical process of digestion, we might be able to tap into kind of almost like the experience of the food that we eat, like get some communication of what it's like to be a plant, or what it's like to be an animal, that we can really connect with that in a living way. And like Gurdjieff seems to, from some of the things he says, he seems to suggest that that's possible, and that's something that I think he had kind of abilities in. Like he talks about higher certain plants, like that we associate with the natural drugs, like mushrooms and cannabis and maybe like opium and stuff, these natural plants and substances, as having some higher sort of matters in them, higher information that he links again with like the sun and things. So that when we take those substances into us, then that's why they have that effect on us, is because we're getting kind of some of the material from a higher level. And again, he seems to suggest that those sort of like opium and cannabis and those other, sort of active natural, drugs, he kind of almost suggests that they were, like intentionally put onto earth as almost like a means, for man to have some form of connection with these higher matters or higher information, So obviously that's the idea then, that's why, the ancient cultures used them, was for this process of tapping it, not just for recreation. I mean, that, they can use that as well, but with a more serious purpose of trying to, tap into, these higher information or higher potentials that we have, And so, like, the idea being that they can give you a kind of a glimpse of something that's possible through a natural line of work,
And this is why we shouldn't be eating things like the fast foods outlets. I just mentioned one like McDonald's or whatever, because that's obviously the dumbing down type of foods. It's not going to give us anything.
Yeah, well, like he talks a bit about that in Beelzebub, like with his kind of tirade against like canned food and stuff, and saying that a lot of the ways that we process our foods kind of removes the main, like he talks about active elements, So the way we process food and things takes away the those higher active elements that we need, just for the body. So like, obviously the idea being that if we eat all this processed food with these kind of unnatural chemicals in them, or chemicals that you wouldn't find in the food naturally, that sort of distorts our our inner world, or we make things harder for ourselves by that kind of food that we put into our system. It's like, it's like making our body try to dance in like steel toe cap boots. You know what I mean? We're just putting an extra weight on ourselves by that kind of food. And also, I think there's an element there of like, we have all those mass like chicken farms and how we farm en masse, and we just, treat the animals like shit, don't we? So again, there's the idea that the impressions, like the experiences of the animals, and you could say plants as well, then, that they enter us like through the food, And I suppose there's that idea in like Islam and stuff, isn't there? Or not just that, like, Judaism as well, that there was certain process that we were supposed to go through in, like, the killing of an animal to try to make it clean, like try not to try to do it quickly and without any fear and stuff, so that those impressions wouldn't be kind of like in the food and we wouldn't take them on, into ourselves. So I do think, again, not only is there all the chemicals in the food that, can give us problems, but also the way that we farm the animals and the experiences that we kind of make them go through. I think we can, again, pick up on that, so we can get like added negative emotions and mental disturbance from the chemicals in the food and from the very experiences that were present in the animals that that we've eaten. So it goes on about the idea of to eat organic then if you can, and also maybe even more importantly to try to have a certain attitude when eating, try to be more present and try to really kind of see it as a sacred act, eating. Because, like, again, in his thing, that is eating and being eaten. That's the cycle. That's the means kind of through which everything is connected.
And of course, if you are present when you're eating, then you will be aware of what it is you're eating, and would then be also internally working on that substance as it's going into you, and so forth.
Yeah, and just that it was common, isn't it? Like in most of the religions, there's the idea that to have a prayer and things before you eat, isn't there? So even there's these, these ideas that it's not just a question of like, just being thankful. I mean, that, that's important as well. But the idea being that through that giving thanks, or through having that attitude towards eating or food, like something sacred, that's what can enable us to get something more out of it, out of the food.
And I wonder on why blessing is very important. Like, I bless my food. I know a lot of other people that bless their food before they eat and drink because of the power of the word, and that word that you're blessing it with, you're trying to connected with the divine at the same time.
Yeah. Well, again, I think he talks about that as well, doesn't he? I think Gurdjieff, isn't there like some episode? I can't remember which of the books it's in, but I think he gets some water, like a little vial of water from somewhere, and like the implication is that he takes it and he does something with it, and then he gives it. I think it's maybe in like the Women of the Rope or something. And I think so the idea is that he does, like, he blesses this water and he gives it to someone as because maybe they're suffering, with some illness and stuff. And so he gives it, says, take this water. I've kind of like, I've blessed it. I've put something into it, and and you can take it, and it'll heal you. And I mean, people might just take that as placebo, but there may be something more to it as well. That, like you say, that we can, through the act of praying over our food, we can get something more out of it. Like the idea that we need more than just our daily bread. We need more than just the physical aspect of the food to really live, to be nourished, to have a meaningful life. Because but in terms of the the soul and the higher bodies, then the idea being that all the different aspects of our life contribute to that. Like every aspect that we engage in, whether it's towards what we eat or our interactions with other people, that it all contributes to that process of developing these higher bodies, which which we were talking about. The soul is considered to be one of these. It seems to be implied that the soul is what Gurdjieff calls the highest being body in Beelzebub's Tales. I think I'm not sure if he ever refers to that. I'd have to have a look whether we ever actually explicitly refers to that highest being body as the soul. I'm not sure, but there is definitely a connection there. So you could either see the highest being body as the soul itself, or as what is the what is the body, the means for the soul. And again, there's a kind of a link between the soul and real I made there. That you could say then the highest being body would be like the body of or the vehicle of the real I. And also, doesn't he, like in Beelzebub's Tales, I think he says that it's only the highest being body that can that is able to have what he calls objective reason. So like he kind of says that the physical body, and even like what he calls the cosmic body, the second body, that they're not possible to have this objective reason in them. And so also then, like, he kind of suggests that it is this reason, like objective reason, that is what can be the means to actually link man and God. Like it's through this element of reason, rather than just an element of like being or something, or consciousness. We might think that it's our being or consciousness that is our means of connection with God then, or the divine. But he seems to suggest that it's through this our reason, and or through objective reason. And like in Beelzebub's Tales, there's loads of episodes, isn't there, of like the angels then, or higher beings, kind of almost like having discussions with God about what to do, so like sharing their reason with him, and then like try to work out, So it's always implied that God kind of requires the sort of development of reason in other beings in order to bounce ideas off or get things done. Like the idea is that he needs the reason of other beings, and the wisdom and the knowledge that can come through their experiences. And there's a big deal, isn't there, made in Beelzebub's Tales about the need for sort of individuals. I think he says relatively free individuals to be an aid in like the administration of the creation, or the enlarging world. So again, the idea that we need to develop a reason, or like an intelligence, so that we can like more consciously participate in that process of how the universe maintains itself and develops. That we can. The idea is that we can really become a valued participant in that. That we can actually have some real contribution to make.
He wants some like-minded company.
Yeah.
He wants some like-minded company.
Yeah, well, that's another way of looking at it. Yeah, maybe he's lonely. Yeah.
Well,
But yeah, so the idea.
cool.
The idea being that that we can actually make some valid contribution, so that it kind of presents a different idea of God to what we seem to find in other traditions, because most of the others don't seem to almost put any they kind of remove God from any limitation or any need. They just say, well, God's like perfect, pristine, he's not in need of anything, doesn't have any woes or troubles. But the picture that's presented in Beelzebub's Tales is almost like the opposite of that, like that God needs help, and that in certain respects he's not unlimited, that he has his own like work to do in the same way that we do, and has limitations and conditions around that.
He wants interaction.
It does seem to present a different like in Beelzebub there's that, God knows about the pronunciation, but there's something called like acute God litanical period, right? So I think that translates as like some period where God almost had to ask for help. So again, that's like, it's very different to most of the takes, isn't it? That God is portrayed as something that's not in need of any help,
I've actually got a bit of a quote from Beelzebub's here. I was going to read it about higher being bodies. So this is from Beelzebub's page 60 to 61.
Yeah.
Higher being bodies, or as they are called on some planets, souls, arise in the free brain beings breeding on all planets, except those before reaching which the emanations of our most holy Son Absolute, owing to repeated deflections, gradually lose the fullness of their strength and eventually cease entirely to contain the vivific power for coating being bodies, for coating higher being bodies. So he's saying it is the soul, isn't it, the higher being body, but we've got to develop it.
Yeah. And so if we say that those, like he talks of two higher being bodies, so I think, and again in other traditions, that some of them seem to have almost like two souls, or they speak of the soul as like having two aspects to it. So you could think of like a lower aspect and a higher aspect. And I think in Beelzebub's Tales he mentions something along those lines. In a phrase somewhere, there's some phrase that says something about a kind of exchange, some form of exchange of what he calls the lower part of the soul, right? Mm-hmm. And he also talks about different kinds of reincarnation. Like he says that like what he would call real incarnation is really rare. But he does talk of a form of reincarnation that's related to the second body, the Kesdran body. And he kind of almost suggests that, like, a being who's developed their Kesdran body to some degree is then, like, let's say then, they're not, they're not limited to the physical body. So let's say when the physical body dies, they still have some, some being and consciousness. And that that being, that Kesdran body can attach to another physical human, the body of a physical human, or like what would be their, not necessarily their physical body, but whatever would be the material of their second body, even though so there's a kind of idea that someone could reincarnate or make a connection with, say, the Kesdran body or its, early sort of development after death. So like people could be, this second body then has this kind of communal aspect to it, that we can kind of, like literally share bodies, or like a Kesdran body can share the experiences of another physical body, another human. They can be linked and they can work together and help each other.
So they might not, the body that's a physical body wouldn't know that Kesdran body is somebody else.
He doesn't really say, but it kind of implies both, that maybe another Kesdran body of somebody else can come in and kind of use you, make use of you, but maybe that could be not just like a parasitic one-way relationship that, like, I'm just getting used by this this other Kesdran body, but maybe there can be a mutual benefit, and that maybe that begins kind of as unconscious to the physical embodied human, but maybe that can develop. Maybe if I develop a bit of consciousness of that sort of second body, or at that level, that maybe there can be that kind of a more conscious exchange. And that Kesdran body, like if we're saying it's one aspect of the soul, like this lower part of the soul, he says that that is a kind of a communal body, and is another means of interaction, sort of sharing, exchange of material ideas between people. And I think there's an idea here that say if you took like some master, then like someone who attained a significant degree of being or attainment, that they could, let's say when they died, then they could kind of reincarnate, but in the Kesdjan body or bodies of a group of people, so like this. So you imagine the master dies then, and then he kind of reincarnates, but not in one person, but kind of in a group of people, in their sort of being active influence in their Kesdjan bodies. So again, there's ideas of like group souls and things there. And also maybe even like, if you looked at something like the second coming of Christ and things, there's some kind of implications made that, the second coming isn't going to turn up as one dude, one guy, one physical person, but he could be embodied in a number, a whole group of people. And that's kind of like what the idea of the church is really, isn't it? Like Christianity, the idea of becoming embodied into the body of Christ, So like in his thing about the higher bodies, then them being the means of that kind of communion, a different kind of communion between people and something of a higher nature. So I just wanted to say that the higher being bodies, he talks of two of them, and if we link them both to the soul, then obviously the Kesdjan body would be kind of it would be linked to this lower part of the soul, which he expresses as something that's a bit more able of interaction between people, and a different way that people can like literally commune, become one, like form between, like, let's say people get together then in some kind of group and do some work together, then it's like maybe through the intensity of their work, or if they kind of make a decent connection, that their kind of Kesdjan bodies then, or the material of what they would be made from, can unite and form like a group soul, like an actual entity, a single being, which can then like help them, the group, in their work, in their own individual work, and whatever the the group might be able to offer or do on a larger scale.
Just going back to the Jesus analogy you just used, or the Jesus Christ one, because I often think people misunderstand this second coming and think that, like you say, it's, Jesus himself is going to come back. Where I think that it will probably be the Christ energy, which is maybe what you're discussing here, of it going into a group of people. It's that Christ energy that's being transmitted down.
Yeah, and doesn't he also say, Gurdjieff, like in Beelzebub, I think it's in Beelzebub, that like when a religion gets founded, there's like some prophet figure, like he talks about messengers from above. So let's say then some figure incarnates from a higher level, and they become the founding prophet of a religion. But he kind of says that the work that individual's got to do is like on multiple levels. On one level, it's got to do some work on the physical level, so it's got to meet this being, and it's got to meet people, give the teaching, whatever the teaching is, and sort of set up some kind of physical presence. That could be like the establishment of what leads to a church, or some established physical organization. So that's one level of the work that he has to do, establish something on the physical plane. But there's also the idea that he has other work to do, which concerns these other levels of being, like that we might sort of relate to the Kesdjan body and the soul then. And that the more significant part of his work concerns work on that level. So that's not, that level of work isn't seen in his physical, actions. As I know, if people were just observing him, they'd only see the physical work that he's doing. They wouldn't see like the work on the other levels, unless they had developed some means to sort of perceive that or participate in it. So again, like part of the work of the religious founder, then they have to not only create the organization, but they have to create like some kind of symbol. Like obviously all the main religions have symbols associated with them. Like we've got the cross, of like Christ and like the Star of David and things usually. So usually there's like a symbol connected with the religion, and along with that symbol, one main or central sort of ritual or form of practice. And so he kind of says that the creation of the symbol and the kind of creation of the ritual, although obviously we're perceiving that on a physical level, he's saying that they really pertain what's actually going on in that, in the creation of the symbol, is something on, it's a work on a higher level. And it's that work that can really enable people to connect with the inner side of the religion, like the exoteric side, rather than just the esoteric side, rather than just the exoteric side. So like the external creation of the religion and the general practices serve the general populace who can only sort of connect to it at the exoteric level. But with like the creation of the symbols and like these rituals, there's something imparted into them that can serve as a means for the mesoteric or the esoteric sort of teaching, So like it almost says that through the creation of this symbol, it's like the prophet figure puts a lot of energy, like imagine like in the atmosphere then, it's like through the creation of this symbol there's a concentration of energy, and that people can, that people who later come in contact with that religion can access that energy. And Gurdjieff has his exercise, I think it's called like the 4 prophets or the 4 ideals, and that's linked to another term that he talks about, conscious stealing. So the idea being that, like these religions and their symbols have or create like reservoirs of energy, higher energy, that people potentially, if they have the means, can access, can access that energy and use it for their work. But like with the stealing, conscious stealing, the idea being then that you can take it if you're able to take it, but there is some sort of payment or obligation that comes with that, if you do access that energy. And so he says that like you could think of particular locations then that are associated with the different religions, like maybe like Jerusalem or Bethlehem, that the energies get concentrated in those locations, but kind of not strictly, it's like saying that there's some energy, he almost says it, that these figures are in the atmosphere, like because they're Christ, then Buddha, almost speak to them as like something in the atmosphere.
Yeah, he says they're above the cities.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea being that through their work then, the founders of religions, they established this means of concentrating the energy. So like think of all the people who like at this moment now around the world, let's say Christians, different time zones, like how many millions of people must be engaged in prayer at this moment. And it almost says that the energy of that prayer gets kind of, channeled to the, like you're saying, to the prophet or to, and that location, So like their prayers are like a means of charging up this, this energy, this reservoir, which then other people can maybe tap into, or which maybe the being, some higher being itself can then use that energy or direct it into the world to get, to help and get things done.
Because I find it interesting, I'm just going to go back a little bit, when you were saying about the symbols, and of course many people relate the Enneagram to Gurdjieff as his symbol.
Yeah.
So whether we put, if we could understand the power in that. And also when you were saying earlier about the glass of water, whether he was doing a symbol on it, because no one knows what he did. He went away, didn't he? Did he just think on it? Did he meditate on it? Did he send his energy into it? I don't know if you know about the Japanese, I've forgotten his name, Machio, I've forgotten his name, but he did all the research into putting onto water words, which again is the power of the words and putting them symbols into that thing. Because if you did peace, it did the water when put under a microscope was a lovely, beautiful.
Didn't it alter the molecular structure?
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in detail, but I've seen bits of it. So exactly, like who knows what he did to to what means he used to kind of put some energy into it. But it could have involved like what we would normally think of magic, so like the use of words, symbol to channel or concentrate energy or intent, isn't it?
Yes. Which is the same as what you're saying about in these sacred places, like for example Jerusalem with Christ above it, everyone's praying and sending all that energy to Christ, which is going to that area above Jerusalem, or with the prophet above Mecca,
Yeah.
and such like.
Yeah. So if we have the means, we can tap into that, and maybe that the people's prayers provide, like the prophet then, or that sort of level of intelligence, with a means of energy to get stuff done. So, like, though some people might look at general religious practitioners as like, well, most people don't look at them too favorably, do they? See them as brainwashed and blah blah blah. But they may be, though they might have their limitations in their understanding, their religion, but they may be actually serving a really vital role, by their prayers and stuff, So that being maybe a concern, it seems to be a concern of Gurdjieff and also Bennett, J.G. Bennett, who I'm a fan of. Like, with man's obviously modern development of science, like religion is waning, is it? Not many people are going to like church and stuff, blah, blah, blah. So I think they kind of think that, if all the religions go and they're not replaced by something equivalent, then we're going to be in a bad place. Like, so I think Gurdjieff's part of his work, and he talked about it as his whim, like I think one time Gurdjieff was, in a conversation, he says, a real man must have a whim, not only must he have his aims, but he also must have some kind of a whim. And I think, somebody asked him, well, what's yours? And I think he said, well, it would be to bring a new conception of like God, or man and God, new conception, bring a new meaning to the word God, a new idea of God. So I think that's very tied with his attempt to bring man like a palatable form of religion, let's say then, or worship, for the modern times. We need like a new sacred, a new idea of religion, or sacredness, some kind of new practice that's suitable to our modern times and all the ideas that we have now through modern science. But yeah, just the idea that that is needed, some kind of form of religious practice and like worship, and so like maybe with his movements and some of his like his kind of the ritual elements that enter his work, like the toast and things, maybe they are that, like they're the attempt to bring like a new, I don't want to say a new religion, but some kind of new means of worship and concentrating these energies that are needed.
So it's not worshipping Gurdjieff, because he would hate that. He would absolutely detest that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely not worshipping. No.
Because sometimes I find people misunderstand that, and I see them having, it's nice to have a picture of him up on your wall, because I think it's good that we remember him, and having a picture of him is there for you to remember about the work. But he does not want to be idolized. He doesn't want his work to be idolized. He wants you to use that work to create the energies that you're discussing, of making a creative energy out there.
Well, like that relates to that idea then. Like, say maybe I have a picture of Gurdjieff on on my wall, then maybe I can use that as like what we mean by a sacred image, like the equivalent of a picture of Christ or the cross. I'm not saying that we're equating Gurdjieff with Christ, but what it could mean to me, how I can use it, can be the same. So yeah, the idea being that I can use his image then as a means of like worship to connect to something. But obviously, in doing that, I need to get past the image, him, the personality. I have to be able to get beyond that and use that as a middleman to connect. So the same idea applying to like pictures of Christ then, or other sacred figures. So I can use them, but I need to, use them as a means rather than getting tied to just the external form. Like you're saying, people can worship the personality, let's say, than a Gurdjieff, rather than try to use him as, like an inspiration to something beyond that.
And also he was saying that when people are praying, many of them aren't using, I can't remember his exact words, which is very naughty of me, but more or less that they're not praying properly. They're just giving out a little prayer, make me rich, find me my lover, or whatever, them kind of prayers that aren't going beyond to the divine source.
I think he says something like, most prayers don't reach past the parapet of the church roof.
That's it, yes.
They need a bit, a bit of energy to get beyond that, yeah. But the idea being that then, if there are people who have some, who have some ableness, then they can use that. They can use the energy even of just like going to a church, because like even though there's people praying in it or have prayed in it, and maybe those prayers haven't, got past the roof of the church, but the idea being then that because they're still sort of there, that somebody else might be able to use them, you know. Or maybe that through the prayers building up in a church, it creates an atmosphere which then someone who goes there in a time of real need, you know, maybe that can make a connection with them. You know, maybe it's like partially determined by the degree of need, you know. Like there's that phrase, isn't it, like increase your necessity, you know, because like necessity is the mother of invention. So the bigger the need, the more kind of like intelligence could come to bear, you know.
I've never quite understood his when he says about still their prayers.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what he means by that, or
Well,
how to do it? How do you do it?
I think first of all, if you have something already, let's say that you've done some work on yourself in some form or another, and you know maybe you've got a little bit more something than the average person, then like maybe naturally if you go into a church and are one of these sacred places where people maybe are or have been worshipping, that you might naturally be able to pick up on that. It might just happen, but also you might have to make a conscious effort to tap into that. I mean, I would think about it in terms of, let's just say you go into a church maybe, and you know, there's other people. There might be a few people sitting there praying, and I'd try to like open myself then through like, you know, it'd be probably your heart center to try to feel, like literally try and feel the wishes and the desires, you know, the joys and sufferings of the people, you know, who are there. Like if I can maybe open myself to that and kind of tap into like, I don't have to mean like specifically knowing what they're wishing or praying for, but just tapping into feeling that, you know, just feeling that, you know, their little, yes, their hopes. So maybe if I can open myself to that, connect with that, you know, in some way feel like, you know, have some compassion for their, you know, their search and their prayers, and maybe then through doing that, I might like, you know, connect to that energy. So it's not, in one sense, it could be seen as stealing, but in another sense, it might just be a case of it needs, if there's no one else that's there who can make use of it, it might not be made use of. So like the stealing, maybe a bit of a tongue-in-cheek sort of, you know, take on it. Or just the idea, like what we were saying before, that if you do take that, there is going to be some demand made on you to give back. It's like, you know, I can go and literally absorb the energy that they're like emitting and use it for my own work. But the idea being that I need to give something back. I need to have an aim that's bigger than just my own, you know, satisfaction. Then if I have an aim to do something to serve, then I will be helped by receiving those, you know, receiving their energies, you know. So I don't see it as like stealing in the normal sense, but just the idea that people who are able can take from this reservoir in different ways, but you will be required to pay, to do some form to pay back for it. I mean, that's kind of like another thing in Gurdjieff. He says, like, if you do something to help someone, then like Mother Nature owes you a debt, sort of, and it's almost like a mathematical law that you will be repaid for it. You know, so the idea being like the more you give, the more you receive, and the more you can receive, the more you can give. If you've got the right intention to help, you know.
So it's like a karmic kickback.
Yeah.
And I notice sometimes if you are on some kind of path, and I hope I'm not jinxing this for myself, but I find that if you are trying to develop yourself, normally that karma comes back quite quickly, where perhaps people that aren't on a path of any kind, that karma could happen any time in their life.
Yeah. Well, I think there's that idea that I suppose maybe as you progress on your path, that maybe things get stricter in that way, that, you know,
maybe because it wants to encourage you to continue on your path.
Yeah.
So perhaps you need to learn that quick little lesson.
Yeah, maybe as you progress, the kind of like the consequences of your actions maybe meet you quicker, if you see you know what I mean. So, but that's not necessarily being a bad thing. If I have the kind of you know, the faith or the belief that I can make use of the consequences, because it's like the consequences of my actions can teach me, you know, isn't it? Like if I do something and it has bad consequences and I suffer those consequences, obviously it's unpleasant, but it can be a means of learning, you know, if I have the means to take that on board, and, you know, that those consequences, and see an opportunity to do something different or do something more, you know. So I think like there's that prayer, isn't it? That like, you know, please God, may the consequences of my actions come upon me quickly so I can learn from my mistakes as quickly as possible, you know. Or like the idea there with the strivings in, you know, Ashat Shamash, you know, the prophet figure in Beelzebub's Tale. You know, the striving to like pay the debt of your arising as quickly as possible, so then you're able to help. And that, you know, the debt of your arising seems to be connected with like, you know, I suppose you could say the development of your essence, or what is your like true individuality, you know, because that's your true essence, your individuality. That's what you can contribute. So the sooner I can tap into my real individuality is the sooner I can get, you know, on my path and become and get involved in what I'm supposed to, you know, get involved in, and the talents that I have, you know, to offer, that we all have.
Because I also recall somewhere Gurdjieff said, we're here to, you know, this work will help you break your astrology, meaning your all life is fated, but if you can break what is written down in your astrological cycle, then, you know, you're on a developing path, you're going forwards and upwards to break yourself free from it all.
Yeah, well, like, you know, the idea being, isn't that we're given both a kind of an essence and a personality sort of at birth. And, you know, though the essence is more like, he says it's what is actually ours, what kind of we come into the world with, that's, you know, something unique to ourselves. But there are also like essence types, aren't there? So it's like, you know, when you're born, you're given a personality, but you're given an essence from this common like pool of essences of the different types. So that's going to an extent, condition, you know, what you do in life, or your, you know, your views and your beliefs, the kind of person that you are. So on the one hand, there's a requirement to like find your essence type and stuff, then get to know it, and so you can, you know, so then the essence can use the personality to actually manifest it, to live a life that's, you know, that's actually suitable for that essence. But so you can develop the essence, but the idea being that, you need to sort of go beyond your essence type, you know, because it's a limitation in one sense, although it's like your way into life, like your type and my type are what give us like access to different situations and experiences in life. It's like if you have one type, you're going to have certain experiences in your life, and if you're another, you're going to have different. So there's a limitation there, that you're going to have these experiences and not the other, but also that's your particular type is what enables you to have those set of experiences, you know, and that's a means to learn and develop. But the idea being that true sort of individuality is beyond your sort of essence type, you know, or can be transformed from it. Like again, Gurdjieff talks about, you know, In Search of the Miraculous as like a real I can only like grow from the essence. He says it's like you could almost see the real I, real individuality, as the maturation of your particular essence. So you could think you start off with your type, and then you try to expand to sort of include other types, you know, so then you can become a more like full human being, you know, an expression of the whole of the human essence, rather than just, you know, just one type of expression of it.
I wonder if that's where people have got in the new age. I've noticed in the last 100 years, many people have put types onto the Enneagram, haven't they?
Yeah.
I don't follow all that myself, but I wonder if that's where perhaps people have misunderstood it.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean, like the different sort of personality types and stuff. I mean, I mean, fair play to people if that's what if they get something out of it, but that's not, it's not something that I've been sort of interested in. But you know, I suppose in one sense, at least it's getting the Enneagram out there, in that people might come at it through the personality thing, but they might also then go and do some research and you know, look at the symbol in its wider context, you know. But just going back to like the higher bodies and the soul, like there's that, you know, you can he calls them like higher being bodies, doesn't he? Like, you know, you could think, well, it's a strange term, like being bodies. You could think, well, why didn't you just say higher bodies, you know? So you think, well, what's that? What's the connotation of being there? Is it like, you know, just being in it's the bodies of a higher level of being, a higher degree of being, or maybe is it like literally a body of being? So like the you know, bodies formed from whatever you consider to be being, you know, like again in his work, there's like three aspects, isn't there? Like being and knowledge and understanding. So it kind of says that understanding is dependent on the balanced development of being and knowledge. But yeah, maybe these like the higher bodies, then again, they're not so much they're not so much like a physical body, you know, what we might imagine as like a body, like a physical one, but maybe it's like a body of being, you know. And I suppose then we have to ask them, what is, you know, what do we think being, you know, that aspect of being is.
Well, he does say, doesn't he, that if you don't develop your understanding and your knowledge in a balanced way, your being will be unbalanced, won't
Yeah.
it? So you
Yeah.
need to work on both. So it's not
Well, yeah,
just getting that knowledge, you need to understand what's going on. You need the wisdom to come with it, which is the top of the Kabbalah tree as well.
Yeah.
You know, the top of the Kabbalah tree is a
Yeah.
triangle, isn't it? It's got wisdom, knowledge, and then the divine on the top, or Keter.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so like, yeah, he says that that understanding is dependent on the sort of parallel development of being and knowledge. And if I get too much knowledge, then I can't remember what he calls it, but I think he says like, you know, so if you went all the way down, if you just like developed your knowledge, you'd have like all this knowledge, like maybe you'd know everything, but you might not have the ableness to do anything. So like the ableness then being so related to the being, but then vice versa, if you develop being but no knowledge, you might have the ability to do anything, but you don't have the knowledge of what to do, you know. So yeah, the idea being those two aspects need to develop in tandem to give understanding.
I always thought the one with too much intelligence or too much knowledge was kind of like, you know, them really clever professors that have got no common sense.
Yeah. I think he calls does he call the other one the stupid saint?
That's it. Yes, the stupid saint.
The one?
Yes.
That's the one that's got no knowledge, but the being, you know. Yes. But I can't remember what he calls the other one. But yeah, like the classic professor who knows all this stuff, but he's constantly losing his umbrella. You know, no doubt. But so yeah, so this being, you know, like being something separate than knowledge. I mean, it does seem that in our sort of not like the world view that we're in now, that knowledge is like considered as what we're after. You know, we think if we have the knowledge, all we need is the knowledge. If we have enough knowledge, then we can, like, you know, solve all our problems. Whereas, you know, like he's kind of saying that no, you could have all the knowledge in the world, but you might not have the being to really make use of that knowledge. And I think there's that story from Ouspensky. I think he didn't write a little book called something like The Strange Life of
Ivan Ossokin.
Ossokin, yeah. So again, I haven't read it, but the idea is that he kind of becomes aware that he's living in, like, you know, eternal recurrence, the same sort of like life repeating itself. So it's like he has some insight into that, and maybe could even know what's going to happen, like, you know, like Groundhog Day. Maybe he knows what's.
It is like Groundhog Day.
Yeah,
because he keeps repeating it over. It's like he's got the knowledge, and then he kind of begins to forget that he's got the knowledge to change it. Yeah. So he hasn't got the knowledge and the wisdom. He's got the knowledge at one point, but not the wisdom to make the difference. And then so he falls back into old ways.
Yeah, so I mean, you could know like the future then, you know, in that example, but you might not have any ability to change it or really learn anything different from it. You know what I mean? So again, that ability to kind of learn from it being related to this being aspect, and that being something different to knowledge. Like I think in Search of the Miraculous, he kind of links. He says that, like, you know, the more primitive, like triadal cultures and stuff, he says they're more based in being. You know, they have a greater kind of development of being or essence, but they don't have much in the way of like knowledge and personality. So, like, you know, again, the idea being this balance. But,
so are they living a truer life than we are, because we're too busy, you know, using our knowledge to create these wonderful cities that we live in and all this transport and the rat race that we live in?
Yeah.
Where they're not living in that kind of world.
Yeah, I mean, he does suggest in one sense that it's more harmonious and kind of more natural, but he also expresses that this other side, then the knowledge and the personality is needed. You know, that it does have some role to play, and that there is a kind of a purpose to the kind of, like, you know, technological and you know, the development of knowledge that does have a purpose, but yeah, it needs to be balanced with this development of being. So, like, if we say then the higher bodies, at least in one aspect, they concern this element of being, like a development of being. And you could, again, there is like a link between the word being and vessel or containment itself. You know, like to be a being, you could link that as like having a, like, you know, having having an edge. You know, like a being has to be a being. I have to be differentiated or distinguished from, well, another being. So like that, the aspect of being might relate to kind of containment. And again, you could think in the alchemical sense that, you know, we need a vessel, don't we, in order to, like, you know, put these substances in and heat them up and transform them. So yeah, the being aspect might be like what we can contain, and then like knowledge can come into that container, and through our actions we can maybe transform that knowledge into like understanding or wisdom. But yeah, so again, like if the higher being bodies have this aspect of being, they seem to be like higher bodies then are a means for enabling like
A transmutation.
yeah, enabling like higher experiences. You know, it's like think about the higher centers and the lower centers. Like Gurdjieff says, we have these higher centers and they're active all the time, but there's like, you know, there's not a proper connection between the higher centers and the lower centers. So anytime they do come into contact, it's it can be a distorted form. Like he talks about like epilepsy in certain conditions as being the result of connections being made between the lower centers and the higher centers. But when the lower centers aren't able to handle that, so, you know, you can imagine like an influx of energy then, say, from the higher centers, you know, a higher grade energy into us, but because our lower centers haven't got the ableness to deal with that higher energy, it can cause all these kind of like, you know, aberrations, whether like physical conditions or just, you know, just distortions in our understanding.
But when something like that happens, obviously the person's not prepared themselves, have they? But maybe they're not aware that that's what they've got to do, so they're not getting that guidance.
Yeah, like I definitely think that some situations where people might be having, like, for example, panic attacks, you know, and they don't really know why. They might not have had any like obvious traumatic experiences in their previous life, but they might just be subject to like what they see as random panic attacks. And from my experience of, like, you know, observing certain people, I think a lot of what's going on there is that they're making a connection to some, like, say, higher centers and stuff, or a higher state, but they're just not, they don't know what's going on, and they don't know how to handle it. So obviously, if that starts happening to me and I don't know what's going on, I'm going to freak out. You know, I might think that I'm like having a heart attack or some mental episode, whereas I'm just, you know, I'm just receiving a higher energy. And if I don't know what's going on, I freak out. That's kind of just makes it worse, doesn't it? That like amps up my body's reaction to that. You know, the fear just makes it worse. So yeah, like a lot of these like conditions that people have, they may be they may just be like side effects of an unsort of prepared connection with the higher centers. And a lot of the work, you know, the practices of the work seem to be aimed at preparation. Like Gurdjieff, doesn't he? He talks about his exercises, some of them as like soil preparation for real I or real individuality. So yeah, the idea being that we need to make ourselves able to receive the, say, higher energies or make contact with the higher centers, then, because they're very intense, you know, and you know, by nature, and if we don't have the means to you know, to bear them, then it will cause issues, you know?
Which is why we should be having, you know, some kind of guidance on this kind of thing. And I know not just in the Gurdjieff work, in other things, like, for example, the people that try to awaken their Kundalini without, you know, a teacher to guide them through it, you know, and it can send you mad, can't it?
Yeah. Well, that's another thing he talks about, doesn't he? He says that a lot of those experiences, like, say, then, you know, what's talked about as Kundalini rising, that doesn't he? He kind of says that a lot of those experiences, a man gets taken by what he calls imagination, just at the point where there's something there that could be really beneficial to him. So it's like through some of these practices, I can initiate all these, you know, these inner sensations and feelings and experiences, but I can get off on them. I can get attached to them, and that being kind of like I mistake those results in me for what is the actual intended result. I'm getting stuck on the surface, so to speak, manifestations of, you know, an action at a deeper level. And like he kind of says that, yeah, if you can, you need to see through the surface sort of manifestations of like Kundalini and stuff to the deeper level, you know, what's the deeper cause, and not become identified with all those expressions of that in the body then, or in the mind.
You just reminded me of something I wanted to talk about earlier. Imagination, very important. And we were discussing earlier about prayers to, for example, Jerusalem and Christ being above it, because Gurdjieff says, you know, we've got to try and not use imagination. But he's really meaning the everyday daydreaming kind of imagination or whatever.
Yeah.
But on that kind of thing, that's when it becomes important to use. It's like a creative imagination, isn't it?
Yeah.
When we're using the imagination to send it, what am I trying to say? Like the energies to, for example, Christ above Jerusalem, Muhammad above Mecca, or Buddha above India. We've got to visualize. He says we can even visualize them people, can't we? So that's using imagination.
Like you're saying, then in like some of these like Kundalini, you know, rising and stuff, there can be a lot of visuals and stuff going on. So you could imagine like some fuel gets into the body or gets activated through those processes, and like it's a high octane fuel, and so it comes into the body, and it's got to go somewhere. It's got to express in some way, and one of the ways that it expresses is in intense, you know, imagination, mental visions and stuff like that. So like, what you're saying, then we can get taken by the kind of automatic, you know, visuals that you know, of the action of the imagination, and just get taken by it. Whereas what you're saying, there needs to be some more kind of intentional use of that capacity to be able to get more out of it. And like he does talk about intentional sort of like visualization exercises. Like again, it might be I can't remember where, it might be in the Women on the Rope, doesn't he? He sort of I think he gives them something like an exercise that you look at something, and then you close your eyes and you try in your mind's eye go on seeing it, you know, as clearly as possible. So maybe I look at a cup, I see the cup, and I close my eyes and I try and go on seeing the cup as clearly as I can in my mental, you know.
He says that will help us when we do our intentional imagination, if we learn to do that, if we use that exercise over and over.
So like, you're developing the more intentional capacity to use the, you know, the stuff of inner images, you know, because it is like, if we say everything is kind of matter, then the stuff of imagination is a matter, you know, it's a substance, and we can we can use it more intentionally and get something out of that. So he gives that exercise, and I think he gives others, and he seems to suggest that that the development of that capacity is a means of concentrating your sort of your energy of intent. And again, you could look at that in terms of magic and stuff, because he says that, you know, through developing those capacities, you know, in himself, Gurdjieff, that he developed he gives the example of, says, oh well, I developed it to such a degree that I could split a table, you know, just through imagining it. You know what I mean?
Even Bruce Lee had to use his hand.
It's the sly man's way. Just do it through your imagination. Split the table without just looking at it.
It's like a Jedi mind trick.
But so like what you're saying, the idea that we do that is part of the work, like the intentional development of, you know, imagination or visualization, and that is needed. You know, it's a needed part of the work. So people maybe don't do many of those practices because maybe they have like this aversion to imagination or that capacity, because of what Gurdjieff says about, you know, imagination is, you know, is a problem. So maybe people cut themselves off from developing that, you know, that side of your nature. And I think again, what we're doing there, if you're like, you know, intentionally using that capacity, like for imagination, in one sense, I think you are exercising like the stuff of the higher bodies, like at least particularly then the Kesdru body. Because if we made a link, say, between that body and the higher emotional center, like the first of the two higher centers, the higher emotional and the higher mental, then there is the idea that higher emotional center can speak to you, communicate to you through symbols and images, inner symbols and images, that will have a specific meaning for you. So if we develop, like, you know, the intentional capacity to use that substance, then become more sensitive to it, we become more able to pick up on like messages that maybe come to us through, like, then say, the higher emotional center, you know, or like, you know, Carl Jung talks about, like, you know, images, archetypes, and stuff like that. So we can use that layer or that mode of mind to learn. And Gurdjieff talks about mentation by form. Like in Beelzebub's Tales, he says that, like, man has two kinds of mentation. So you could say, like, two kinds of thought, or two kinds of mental experience of the world, like two ways of viewing it. And we might link that to, like, mentation by word and mentation by form as, like, conscious and subconscious. So mentation by form might be more of, like, the natural means of thought for the subconscious, like in terms of images and symbols, rather than words, you know, that being the kind of way that it perceives and thinks. So yeah, the idea, yeah, mentation by form, people have connected that with just thinking in terms of pictures, you know, because they make the association between form and picture. But I don't think it's strictly limited to that, because even when Gurdjieff mentions about this mentation by form in Beelzebub, he kind of says, he talks about the forms as something that are prior to the images. Like, he says these forms, you know, sort of act upon the body and then give rise to certain, like, sensations and feelings, which then again give rise to certain pictures. So that, like, the form in meditation by form, I don't think it's strictly equivalent to picture, but picture thinking may be one expression of it. I mean, you can think of, like, the kind of mind or thinking that's going on in dance and stuff. You know, when we're engaging with that, we're not really using our sort of normal frontal, sort of rational and verbal mind. I mean, there might be that going on, like, oh, I have to do, like, say, the movements. Oh, I might be thinking, oh, I need to do this and do this and do this. And, you know, that might be going on in the sort of verbal mind. But really what what you're engaging there is, like, this mentation by form. You know, like the dances themselves, they are the embodiment of well, like he says, higher information, and their embodiment of they are forms. And so there's there's another means of learning there if we can tap into it, that mentation by form.
I've seen we've been talking for an hour, so I'm going to bring it up to a close if you don't mind. I was just looking up, I found imagination.
Oh, yeah.
And this is from All and Everything. Consequences of the organ Kunda buffer among those that form the subjectivity of the given being: self-love, vanity, pride, swagger, imagination, bragging, arrogance. And then he goes on about self-imagination and self-calming, impulses which have become inseparable from ordinary man. But what he also is saying is that he realizes that imagination is a destructive force and that it always carries him away from his more conscious decisions. But this is what I was saying about earlier, the more ordinary day-to-day imagination we use, where the imagination you've just been talking about, if we work on it that way, would work towards developing our higher being bodies.
Because I mean, I definitely think that, like we're saying, in terms of the higher emotional center, I think it works at least partly with the stuff of image and symbol. So we maybe need to develop the intentional capacity of imagination to connect, with that, the higher emotional center. And also that when whatever we're doing, when we like making mental images, like holding them in the mind, I think we are working on some of the substance of the higher bodies, like literally cohering it, So, like, and going back, like Gurdjieff talks about, if we link this like mentation by form with kind of like subconscious, like Gurdjieff doesn't, he says that the conscience, like this sacred conscience, is present in man in his subconsciousness, and not present in his normal waking consciousness. And like he talks about the idea of trying to get this conscience that's in the subconsciousness to participate in our waking consciousness. And people might think about that in terms of trying to make this conscience then, or whatever is in the subconscious, make that conscious to the conscious, try and bring that into our normal waking consciousness. But I think I think more what he's talking about there in like, you know, trying to get this conscience to participate in our waking conscious. It's not that it needs to be like enter it, but we need to just establish some means of communication so that like our frontal waking consciousness can pick up, you know, can receive, say, messages then from that side of our nature, from our subconsciousness. So I don't think it's a case of like we're trying to make what is subconscious conscious, you know, but more trying to shift like the authority over to that side of our nature so that it can inform our normal like waking consciousness, you know.
Because Gurdjieff thinks the subconscious is the one we should be listening to, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, he kind of says that that's the real consciousness of man, you know, and he says it's there already. Like we everybody has a subconscious, so everybody has this real consciousness, but it's just like in our like functioning, it's there's some distortion there that we can, you know, the subconscious doesn't get to manifest itself as it, you know, as it would like.
But I've always
So
wondered, when he says that, does he mean we need that subconscious should be the one that our higher being body should be listening to as we're developing, or does he mean our?
Well, I think the higher being
bodies?
bodies. Yeah, I think the higher being bodies are like they're like the means for the subconsciousness. Like if those higher bodies are developed, then the real consciousness, the subconsciousness, has a more you know, effective and practical way of interacting than say in the world. You know, has an actual, a more, you know, like substantial vehicle or body. So like, yeah, with the higher being bodies, they might, like, say, take the Keshu body, then it might be like a way of like a literal means of connection then, say, between our subconscious and our conscious, like a bridge, you know, so that these like information can go both ways. The subconscious can influence the waking consciousness and give it some direction, and also then vice versa, it can receive things from the normal consciousness and its experiences, you know. So in one sense, that higher being body might be a means of engaging with what is in our subconsciousness, like what's beyond our awareness, you know. So it might not be a matter of trying to like include more and more and more and more into our normal consciousness. Like people can have the idea of the work as like, I need to develop my present awareness, and I need to become like absolutely aware of every little, you know, every little minute thing. Whereas really, I don't think that's what we're after, or that's possible. That it's not about that in that way, trying to become aware of everything with our normal sort of awareness, you know. Like more this idea of trying to establish a connection with what is some means of communication with what is outside of our consciousness, you know.
Okay.
Like say then our subconscious.
Because I think what you was just saying, I used to mistake it for. I thought it would help me be aware of everything that's going on around me, you know, and I'll be able to hear that little fly that's buzzing over there, hear my, you know, feel my dog's mood as he's sitting down here trying to get my attention, and you know, but it's not necessarily like that, like a all-knowing of everything that's going on in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that that normal consciousness can be developed so that we can like experience states where it is amped up, where you may be like much more aware of, you know, the fly buzzing in the room. There are states that you can get into where you are more aware, but and that might be useful for certain things, but it still might not be like, you know, enough for you know, real development, because like my consciousness, my awareness, there's always some perimeter to it. There's always some edge. Like there is always a field that's, you know, a circumference of what's in conscious awareness, but there's always some boundary shot. There's always something that's beyond that, you know. So yeah, the idea that we have to increase this circumference, like to the absolute, maybe, you know, maybe mistaken. Whereas what we're after is some means of connection with what is beyond that, you know. That consciousness. So like it puts a strange twist on what we might think of like real I and these higher bodies are, if we say that they're beyond consciousness, or at least beyond our, you know, beyond our normal consciousness. They're not something that can enter the awareness of our normal consciousness, like as an object. Do you know what I mean?
But it's beyond our normal consciousness. It's our higher consciousness, really, isn't it?
Yeah. But just like even with like say real I, then, or the soul, I think there's the idea that consciousness is only one aspect of it, you know. So there's also, like, you could say then, like, will, you know, there's another, I is made of more than just consciousness. There's some other elements that are involved in it. Whereas, like, in most of the traditions now, like the modern ones, consciousness is put as the absolute, isn't it? Like, that's the idea that everything is consciousness, and that's what that's what you're working to develop. Whereas if we say that, well, yeah, you do need to develop your consciousness, but that's only part of what you really are, and there are some sides of your nature that are beyond consciousness. Then people might think, well, how do I engage with these other sides if they're beyond consciousness? You know.
Well, I'm going to call it to an end, and we can continue this another time, if that's okay for you, because it's been really good, and I hope everybody that does watch this helps them ponder on their development and their idea of the Gurdjieff work. Do you want to tell people about your Facebook blog page, just so if people want to catch up with that?
Like, I have a group, a group page on Facebook that's called Bezel Hubs Tales, like 3 words. So, I just post my musings on that. But I have a WordPress site that's called The Tapestry of Beelzebub's Tales. So people can find my rantings if they want through that.
I would like to thank you, Josh, and we shall do this again very soon. And thank everybody for listening.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. Good to see you again.
And you.
Take care.